Hi, I'm Sam, a 29-year-old guy, and this story revolves around my family, a tight-knit yet overwhelming bunch. Growing up, we were your typical family with ups and downs, but as I got older, I realized the dynamics were far from balanced. My mom, Laura, is the self-appointed matriarch. She thrives on being involved in everything, often micromanaging even when no one asks for her input. Then there's my older sister, Amanda, 32, the golden child in Mom's eyes. Amanda can do no wrong, and her achievements are always front and center. On the other hand, my younger brother Matt, 26, is the peacekeeper. He avoids drama like the plague and stays neutral in most situations. That leaves me, stuck in the middle, not the shining star like Amanda, nor the drama-free escape artist like Matt. Recently, my dad, David, retired, and Mom decided to throw a family gathering to celebrate. True to her style, she didn't ask for input. She just declared it was happening and outlined every detail. She even reminded us all repeatedly to be on our best behavior, which in mom speak translates to not making her look bad. In the days leading up to the party, Mom's habit of stirring the pot resurfaced. She called me and Amanda separately to talk about each other. This time, she mentioned how Amanda had found the perfect gift for Dad, a sleek, expensive watch, and then asked what I was bringing. I proudly told her I was working on a scrapbook highlighting Dad's career achievements. Mom's response: a long pause followed by a lukewarm, "Well, I'm sure he'll appreciate the effort." Translation: it's not as good as Amanda's gift. That subtle dig set the tone for the gathering. When the day finally arrived, I was running a bit late, not intentionally, but because I'd spent extra time making sure my gift was perfect. When I walked into my parents' house, I was met with strained smiles. The first thing Mom commented on was my tardiness. I let it slide, as I always do, and handed over my gift to be placed with the others. Amanda and Matt were already there. Amanda was glued to Mom's side, playing the dutiful daughter, while Matt sat off to the side, scrolling through his phone, doing his best to remain invisible. Dinner went as expected, with Mom subtly reminding everyone she'd cooked everything from scratch. When it came time for the gifts, Amanda's watch was presented first, earning enthusiastic praise from Mom and a round of applause from everyone else. When it was my turn, I handed Dad the scrapbook, explaining how it was filled with photos, clippings, and notes from his colleagues. Dad looked genuinely touched as he flipped through it, but Mom's tight-lipped smile said it all. Her dismissive comment, "It's very sentimental," only reinforced the comparison brewing in the background. What happened next shifted the entire night. After the gifts, I was finally starting to relax a little. Dad seemed genuinely happy with my scrapbook, even if it didn't get the same enthusiastic reception as Amanda's watch. I sat back, letting the familiar hum of family chatter wash over me. But then Mom's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Has anyone seen the envelope?" she asked, her tone sharp. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Confused, I glanced around. "What envelope?" I asked, genuinely clueless. Mom sighed dramatically. "The $500 cash that Amanda included as part of her gift. It's missing. I left it on the kitchen counter earlier, and now it's gone." The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of her words hanging in the air. Her gaze swept the room, but it lingered on me just a little too long. My stomach tightened. I wasn't stupid. I knew exactly what she was implying. Before I could say anything, Amanda chimed in. "That's so strange. It was right there when I handed it to Mom." She gave me a quick glance, her expression unreadable but her timing impeccable. I felt like a spotlight had been turned on me. My past mistakes, a rough patch during college when I'd needed a loan from my parents, were suddenly being dragged out into the open. Mom didn't outright accuse me, but her carefully chosen words, combined with Amanda's theatrics, left little doubt in everyone's mind about who she thought was responsible. "Maybe it got misplaced," Matt offered, trying to diffuse the tension. His voice was calm, but even he didn't seem convinced. "I just don't understand," Mom continued, pacing dramatically. "I was so careful with it. I didn't want anything to happen to it because it was such a thoughtful addition to Amanda's gift." She paused, then looked directly at me. Sam, are you sure you didn't see it when you came in? I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. I didn't even know there was an envelope, I said firmly, keeping my voice steady. I walked straight in, handed over my gift, and sat down. Mom gave me one of her infamous tight smiles, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. It's just odd. That's all I'm saying. The room felt heavy, the unspoken accusation thick in the air. Amanda, ever the opportunist, added, "You did seem a little nervous when you arrived." That was the final straw. My voice shook as I stood up. Are you seriously accusing me of stealing? In front of everyone? Mom waved her hand dismissively, like I was the one overreacting. No one's accusing anyone, Sam. But the envelope is missing, and it's important we figure out what happened. Her words didn't match her tone. She was accusing me, whether she wanted to admit it or not. I glanced around the room. Matt looked uncomfortable but stayed silent as usual. Dad shifted awkwardly in his seat, avoiding eye contact. Even my cousins, who had been chatting happily moments ago, now looked at me with quiet suspicion. I wasn't going to let this slide. You want proof? I said, pulling out my phone. Fine. Let's settle this right now. The room went dead silent as I unlocked my phone. If Mom wanted to accuse me in front of everyone, I'd clear my name in front of everyone too. The air was thick with tension as I unlocked my phone. All eyes were on me, and I could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down like a boulder. If Mom wanted to accuse me, then I'd prove her wrong right here and now. Mom made a half-hearted attempt to stop me. Sam, we don't need to make this a big deal, she said, her voice sharp but unconvincing. I didn't even look at her. You already made it a big deal when you implied I took something I didn't even know existed, I said, my voice calm but firm. I opened my budgeting app first. For the past year, I'd been using it religiously to track every purchase, partly to stay on top of things, but also as a habit I'd developed after my financial struggles in college. I scrolled through my expenses for the day, a quick grocery run in the morning, gas for my car. Every penny was accounted for. I held up my phone for everyone to see. Here's my spending for today. Nothing unaccounted for, nothing shady. Then I moved to my location history, showing the precise GPS trail from my apartment to my parents' house. And here's where I've been all day, I said, holding the phone steady so everyone could see. Straight from my place to here, no stops. No detours. So tell me, when exactly would I have had time to take anything? Matt, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. That actually makes sense, he said, his voice quiet but steady. There's no gap in the timeline. I don't see how Sam could have done it. A few of my cousins murmured in agreement. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe the tide was finally turning. But Mom wasn't done yet. She crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. That's all well and good, she said, her tone icy. But tracking apps and receipts don't prove everything, Sam. This isn't just about the money. It's about your history. You've always been sneaky. Her words hit me like a slap. I stared at her, my anger bubbling to the surface. Sneaky? I repeated, my voice rising. You're dredging up things from years ago to justify this baseless accusation. I've done nothing but try to prove myself to you. And this is how you repay me? Amanda, ever the loyal sidekick, chimed in. You're being awfully defensive, Sam. It's not helping your case. I turned to her, my voice sharp. I'm not being defensive. I'm defending myself. Big difference. And maybe I wouldn't have to if you both didn't jump to conclusions without a shred of evidence. At this point, Dad finally decided to weigh in. Laura, he said, addressing Mom directly, are you absolutely sure the envelope is missing? I mean, completely sure. Maybe you put it somewhere else. Amanda hesitated before speaking. I gave it to Mom earlier in the day, she admitted, glancing nervously at her, for safekeeping. Everyone turned to Mom. She looked flustered, her usual composure cracking. Well, it's not here now, is it? She snapped, clearly on the defensive. We need to keep looking. Her suggestion to search the house felt like an act of desperation, but everyone followed her lead anyway. People started checking under cushions, in drawers, even in the trash, but something felt off to me. Mom was acting strange, hovering near her purse, glancing around nervously. I couldn't shake the feeling that she already knew where the envelope was. As we searched, I noticed her open her purse just a crack, peek inside, and quickly zip it shut again. My stomach twisted. Was she really doing this? I walked over and spotted the edge of a white envelope sticking out of the side pocket. Without thinking, I reached for it and pulled it out. "Is this what we're looking for?" I asked, holding it up. The room froze. Amanda's handwriting was on the front, clear as day. Mom's face turned bright red, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Oh," she stammered. "I must have put it there earlier and forgot." The excuse was weak, and everyone knew it. The silence in the room was deafening. Matt shot me a look that said, "I knew it wasn't you." A couple of cousins shook their heads in disbelief. Dad looked disappointed, but I couldn't tell if it was aimed at Mom or just the situation as a whole. Amanda, for once, was speechless. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "So you accused me, your own son, of stealing, dragged my name through the mud, and humiliated me in front of everyone, all because you forgot where you put the envelope." Mom opened her mouth to respond, but I didn't give her the chance. "I'm done," I said, grabbing my things. "If this is how I'm treated, I don't need to be here." As I walked out, I could hear Mom trying to explain herself, but I didn't stick around to listen. By the time I reached my car, the weight of the evening hit me like a brick. I'd cleared my name, but it didn't feel like a victory. All I could think about was how broken my relationship with my family had become, and how much worse things might get from here. The drive home was quiet, except for the sound of my knuckles rapping on the steering wheel as I replayed the evening in my head. I'd cleared my name, sure, but it came at a cost. Mom's accusation wasn't just about the missing envelope. It felt like a culmination of years of doubt and judgment. That kind of wound doesn't heal with an "oops, I forgot." When I got home, I dropped onto the couch and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. The relief of proving my innocence was overshadowed by the hurt of being accused in the first place. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from Matt. "Hey, just wanted to say I'm sorry for how everything went down tonight. You didn't deserve that." I stared at the message for a moment, then replied, "Thanks. It means a lot that you said that." It wasn't much, but it was something. Matt had always avoided conflict, so him reaching out, even quietly, felt like a small victory. I didn't expect anything from Amanda, though. If anything, I half expected her to double down on the narrative that I'd overreacted, and of course, I was right. The next day, a cousin sent me a screenshot of Amanda's social media post. It read, "Family drama ruins special moments. Some people just can't let things go." She didn't mention names, but it was obvious who she meant. The comments were full of her friends chiming in with supportive messages about how family stress can be so exhausting. I rolled my eyes and tossed my phone onto the table. Classic Amanda, always spinning the story to paint herself as the victim. But it didn't stop there. By late afternoon, Mom texted me too. Her message was a mix of guilt-tripping and deflection. "I really think you overreacted last night. It was all a misunderstanding, and you walking out only made things worse. You embarrassed me in front of everyone." I stared at the screen, my anger bubbling up again. How could she twist everything to make herself the victim? She accused me of stealing, dragged my name through the mud, and now I was the one in the wrong. I closed the text without responding. There was nothing I could say that would get through to her. The silence from Dad, however, was what hurt the most. He usually stepped in to mediate when things got tense, but this time, he hadn't said a word. It felt like he was choosing avoidance over accountability, and that stung. I started to wonder if I was truly on my own in this. A few days later, Matt called me. "Look," he said, his voice careful. "I know how messed up things were at the party, and I get why you left." But Mom's not letting it go. She's been venting to everyone, and Dad's trying to keep the peace. Let me guess, I said, trying to keep my tone even. She's telling everyone I ruined the party? Something like that, Matt admitted. But for what it's worth, a few of the cousins are on your side. They think the whole thing was ridiculous. That did make me feel a little better, but the damage was done. Amanda and Mom were already painting their narrative, and I had no interest in playing along. I decided to focus on setting boundaries. I couldn't control how they spun the story, but I could control how much access they had to me. Later that week, Dad finally called. His tone was cautious, like he was tiptoeing through a minefield. Sam, he started, I wanted to say I'm sorry for how things went at the party. I should have stepped in, but I didn't want to make things worse. I sighed. Dad, you didn't make things worse, but you didn't make them better either. I was left to defend myself against an accusation that Mom had no business making. I know, he said quietly, but for the sake of the family, can we try to move past this? I know your mom made a mistake, but holding on to this isn't going to help anyone. There it was, the classic plea for keeping the peace. I felt a pang of sadness that Dad couldn't see the bigger picture. I'm not holding on to it, Dad, but I can't pretend everything's fine when Mom hasn't even given me a real apology. She accused me of stealing in front of everyone and only backed down when I proved her wrong. He didn't argue. I understand, he said after a pause. Just don't shut us out completely, okay? I won't, I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure if I meant it. That night, I vented to a few close friends about the whole ordeal. Their reactions were blunt and unfiltered. Your mom's out of line, one of them said. You're not wrong for standing up for yourself. Another added, honestly, I'd post receipts, show everyone exactly what happened. I laughed, though I wouldn't actually take it that far. Still, their support gave me some much-needed clarity. I wasn't crazy for expecting better treatment. I wasn't wrong for walking out. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages from extended family. Some offered support, saying they were shocked by what had happened. Others took a more neutral stance, urging me to let it go for the sake of family unity. Amanda, predictably, had been busy spinning her version of events to anyone who would listen. But the real surprise came when one of my cousins sent me an anonymous email. The message was short but validating. I've noticed the favoritism for years. You're not alone in this. Keep standing your ground. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. By the time the weekend rolled around, I was emotionally drained. I had spent the past week trying to navigate the aftermath of the party, dodging Mom's guilt-tripping texts and Amanda's passive-aggressive social media posts. It felt like no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the shadow of that night. But then something unexpected happened. A handwritten letter arrived in the mail. The sight of Mom's familiar cursive on the envelope gave me pause. She wasn't the type to write letters. She preferred quick texts or long, winding phone calls. I sat at the table, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Inside was an apology. Sam, I realize now that I handled things poorly at the party. I let my stress get the better of me and I regret how it all unfolded. I'm sorry for accusing you. I hope we can put this behind us. I stared at the letter, unsure how to feel. On one hand, it was acknowledgement, something I hadn't expected. On the other, it felt hollow. There was no mention of the real issue, her favoritism, her pattern of dismissing me, or how she had humiliated me in front of everyone. It was an apology, but it didn't go far enough. Before I had time to process it fully, my phone buzzed. Amanda, as if she had some sixth sense for drama, called me. Against my better judgment, I answered. You know Mom's been really upset, right? She said, skipping the pleasantries. I sighed. Amanda, if this is about the letter... It's not just the letter, she interrupted. She's devastated about how you treated her at the party. Do you have any idea how hard she works to keep this family together? And then you go and blow everything out of proportion? Blow it out of proportion? I repeated, my voice rising. She accused me of stealing, Amanda, in front of everyone. And now you're acting like I'm the problem? Amanda huffed. She was stressed. You should have just let it go instead of making a scene. I felt my patience snap. Making a scene? The only reason there was a scene is because she made it one. And if you're calling to defend her instead of holding her accountable, I don't have time for this. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt a small sense of triumph. For once, I hadn't let Amanda bulldoze me with her self-righteousness. Later that day, Dad called. His tone was softer than Amanda's, but I could tell he was walking on eggshells. I heard Mom sent you a letter, he began. She did, I confirmed, my tone neutral. And? He asked hesitantly. And? It's a start, but it doesn't fix everything, I replied. Dad, this isn't just about the party. It's about years of favoritism and being treated like I'm not good enough. That letter doesn't erase that. He sighed heavily. I know you felt that way, Sam. I don't agree with how your mom handled things, but maybe this is her way of trying. I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't ignore the history. If she's serious about fixing things, she'll have to do more than write a letter, I said. This isn't something that can be swept under the rug. Dad didn't argue. Fair enough, he said. But maybe family therapy could help. A way for all of us to work through this without it turning into another argument. I hadn't expected that suggestion, especially from Dad, but it gave me pause. Therapy wasn't something I thought Mom would agree to, but the idea of having a neutral third party sounded appealing. I'll think about it, I said finally. Over the next few days, I did more than think. I brought up the idea to a close cousin who had quietly supported me through all this. They encouraged it, saying it could be a way to break through Mom's defensiveness. Buoyed by their support, I decided to pitch the idea to Mom directly. When I called her, she sounded cautiously optimistic. I've been thinking about everything, Sam, she said. I really do want us to move past this. Me too, I said, keeping my tone even. But I think we need help to get there. What do you think about family therapy? There was a pause. Therapy, she repeated, her voice uncertain. Do you really think that's necessary? Yes, I said firmly. I think it's the only way we're going to address everything, not just the party, but the bigger issues. She sighed. I don't know. Therapy feels so formal. Can't we just talk things out ourselves? We've been trying to talk things out for years, Mom. It hasn't worked, I replied gently. This could be a chance for all of us to be heard. To my surprise, Dad chimed in on the line. I think Sam's right, he said. We've been sweeping too much under the rug. Therapy could help us address things in a healthy way. With both of us pushing for it, Mom reluctantly agreed. All right, she said finally. But I hope you're ready for this to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be easy. Easy isn't the point, I said. Getting better is. The first family therapy session felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Mom was visibly tense, clutching her purse like it was a life raft. Dad sat beside her, calm but cautious, while Amanda radiated an air of reluctance that bordered on defiance. Matt, surprisingly, agreed to attend, though he stayed quiet, as expected. The therapist, a kind but no-nonsense woman named Dr. Patel, started by laying down the ground rules. Everyone would have a chance to speak, and there would be no interrupting or blaming. It sounded simple, but given our family dynamics, it felt like an uphill battle. Dr. Patel began by asking each of us to share why we were there. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath and said, I want to address the patterns in our family, the favoritism, the assumptions, and the way conflicts are handled. I need things to change because I can't keep showing up to gatherings where I'm treated like an outsider. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't interrupt. That alone felt like progress. When it was her turn, she leaned forward, her voice defensive. I've never tried to make Sam feel like an outsider. If anything, I've always tried to keep this family together, and sometimes that means making tough decisions. Tough decisions like accusing me of stealing without evidence? I said, unable to help myself. Doctor. Patel stepped in gently. Sam, let's give your mom the floor for now. We'll come back to that. Mom hesitated, then continued. I admit that I handled the situation at the party poorly, she said, her voice tight. I was stressed, and I jumped to conclusions. But I never meant to hurt you, Sam. It was the first time she acknowledged it directly, and while her tone wasn't perfect, it felt like a step forward. Dr. Patel pushed her further, asking why she had been so quick to blame me. Mom shifted uncomfortably before admitting, I guess I still see Sam as the one who struggled with money, and I let that cloud my judgment. Her words stung, but at least she was being honest. That's exactly the problem, I said. You're holding something against me that happened years ago. I've worked hard to rebuild my life, but you still see me as the person I was then. It's not fair. Dr. Patel nodded. Laura, how does it feel to hear that from Sam? Mom looked down at her hands. It's hard, she admitted. I never realized he felt that way. For the first time, I saw a crack in her armor. It didn't erase the years of hurt, but it felt like progress. The sessions continued over the next few weeks. Each one peeled back another layer of our complicated family dynamics. Amanda was predictably resistant, often dismissing the idea of favoritism as overanalyzing. But even she couldn't deny the patterns once Dr. Patel pointed them out. The turning point came during a session when Mom broke down in tears. I've always felt so much pressure to keep the family together, she admitted. And sometimes I put that pressure on Sam because I know he's strong enough to handle it, but I didn't realize how unfair that was. Her words hit me harder than I expected. For years, I'd thought her actions came from a place of criticism or disappointment, but hearing that she saw me as strong, it changed something. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it gave me context. I don't need you to put that on me anymore, I said gently. I need you to see me as I am now, not who I was back then. Mom nodded through her tears. I'll try, she said, and for the first time, I believed her. Outside of therapy, things didn't magically improve overnight. Amanda stayed distant, still clinging to her role as the golden child. But she stopped posting vague jabs on social media, which I considered a small victory. Matt, meanwhile, continued to quietly support me, occasionally checking in with a text or call. The biggest shift was with Mom. She started to catch herself when she slipped into old patterns, whether it was comparing me to Amanda or assuming the worst about me. It wasn't perfect, but the effort was there, and that mattered more than anything. One afternoon, she called me, her voice softer than usual. Sam, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking with therapy. It's been hard, but I think it's helping. It is, I replied honestly, and I appreciate that you've been open to it. For the first time in years, our conversation felt like two adults talking, not a parent lecturing a child. It was a small moment, but it gave me hope. As for me, I've learned to keep my boundaries firm. I don't attend every family gathering, and when I do, I make sure to protect my peace. If a situation starts to feel toxic, I leave without guilt. Therapy taught me that boundaries aren't about punishing others, they're about taking care of yourself. Looking back, I realized this journey wasn't just about clearing my name or fixing my relationship with Mom. It was about reclaiming my voice and standing up for the respect I deserve. Things aren't perfect, and they probably never will be, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm being seen and heard. And that's enough for now. Story 2. I'm a 34-year-old man who has been married to Emily for around 5 years. We've always been quite active with my family, especially my 30-year-old younger brother Alex, and everything between us has been fantastic. Naturally, we were thrilled for Alex and his fiancée Lily when they just became engaged. Emily always seemed to get along well enough with my family. There was nothing particularly noteworthy. I'm still trying to figure out what occurred, though, because it caught me off guard. Alex sent me this wedding invitation a few weeks ago. To be honest, I was pumped. I've been eagerly anticipating his wedding, spending time with his loved ones, catching up with everyone, and simply supporting him. The invitation was exquisite, like one of those elegant cards with gold trimmings that instantly convey the formality of the event. When I opened it, I thought I would see both of our names, but it was only for me. That was strange. I made sure that wasn't an error. The invitation was not joint, only my name. Emily is not mentioned. I initially believed it could have been a straightforward error, or perhaps there was a strange problem with the guest list. In order to avoid frightening Emily if it was simply a mix-up, I refrained from speaking to her immediately away. I chose to investigate it in private instead. I thought my mother would be aware of the situation, so I contacted her. Since my mom and I are rather close, I assumed she would be able to explain it with ease. She appeared strange, though, when I questioned her about it. She paused for a moment, as if she was considering her response to me. She then gave me this strange, half-baked explanation about how Lily and Alex were attempting to keep the guest list modest and that they might not have room for plus ones. However, I didn't like the way she phrased it. She seemed to be attempting to dismiss it, and it was far too casual. And to be honest, I didn't like it. However, I chose to ignore it at the moment. Perhaps I was overanalyzing it, I told myself, and I would deal with it later. It turned out to be a complete disaster, so I should have followed my instincts. I eventually had to share the invitation with Emily. I didn't want to keep anything from her, and I assumed that if I didn't mention it, she would realize something was wrong, so I told her. It was difficult for her, to be honest, far more than I anticipated. Since we were married, we've attended every family function together since she's always been such a family person. She felt as like she was being purposefully excluded from Alex's wedding, so I could see she was upset over not getting an invitation, despite her best efforts to pretend she wasn't. I kept telling her it was probably a mistake and that I would work it out, but the more I considered it, the more uneasy I became. I chose to send Alex a lighthearted text that said, "Hey man, I just received your invitation." I wanted to see how Emily was doing. I wasn't certain whether hers was distinct or not. I was surprised that Alex didn't reply, but I didn't want to come out as combative in case it was an error. This, given how frequently we communicate, was strange. He didn't say anything for a day or two. I could sense that my stomach was not increasing. I sensed something was wrong, but I tried not to bring it up in front of Emily. We hosted this family cookout at my cousin's house the next weekend. I thought I may run into Alex there and have a face-to-face conversation. In order to have a better understanding of the situation, I was expecting that someone would at least bring up the wedding. I heard my cousin discussing Alex and Lily's guest list and how stringent they were about who they invited at the cookout. Before someone else pointed out that everyone but Emily's significant others were invited, I wasn't even really listening. I began to have that gnawing sensation once more at that point. It was more than a simple mix-up. She had been purposefully excluded. I immediately made the decision that if my parents were aware of what was happening, I needed to speak with them seriously. Either they were hiding it, or they didn't believe it was significant enough to deal with. Later that day, I drew them aside and bluntly questioned them about Emily's exclusion. My mom avoided making eye contact the entire time, while my dad tried to dismiss it as if it weren't a big thing. She continued repeating things like, "We don't want any drama before the wedding, and it's only one day." I realized then that they weren't giving me the whole story and that something else was happening. Emily questioned me directly later that evening about the wedding invitation. I told her what I had heard at the BBQ and that Alex still hadn't replied since I didn't have the heart to lie to her. Clearly she was outraged. But more than that, she felt singled out, as if she had done something wrong to merit exclusion. To be honest, I had no replies for her. I began to feel like I was missing something significant the more I gave it some thought. Emily pondered whether it may have been due to a past argument she had with my mother, but that seemed so trivial in light of the current situation. It was all illogical. We were both becoming weary of the situation, and I realized I needed to face Alex head-on. The wedding was no longer the only topic of conversation. It has to do with something more significant. Additionally, I had to find out the truth before things worsened. Update 1. I made the decision to contact Alex personally, rather than wait around any longer. I asked him via text if we could get together. I suggested that we discuss the wedding and Emily's exclusion from the invitation. He didn't respond for a few hours, but at last he responded, and we set up a meeting for later this week. I was okay with his bringing Lily along as well. In any case, I wanted to hear her side of the story. A casual restaurant was chosen as the venue for the meeting. I informed Emily about it in advance, promising to investigate the situation and advocate for her inclusion. Despite her anxious expression, she nodded in the hopes that I might clarify things. I didn't pressure her to go since she didn't want to. Alex and Lily were at the restaurant when I arrived, seated in the corner at a table. The mood was strained from the beginning. Alex was uneasy, and Lily had her arms crossed and was sitting rigidly, as if he was unwilling to be there. Not much small conversation took place. We all obviously understood the purpose of our meeting. I didn't spend any time. I directly questioned them about Emily's exclusion from the wedding invitation. I wasn't searching for any justifications or distractions. I wanted a truthful response. Alex moved around in his chair. However, Lily was the first to speak. She was blunt about it. Emily's presence at the wedding made her uneasy. She seemed to have been prepared to say this for some time because of the directness of her tone, which was almost practiced. Alex remained silent, staring at the table. I was shocked beyond belief. This was different from what I had anticipated, perhaps a misunderstanding or some sort of clarification regarding the guest list. She revealed the shocking information when I pushed her for further information. Lily claims that Emily upset her greatly with remarks she made about their relationship during a family get-together last year. According to Lily, Emily had hinted that she wasn't suitable for Alex and made crude comments. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Emily's remarks of those nature. It sounded nothing like her. When I inquired about the alleged date of this, Lily brought up a particular family cookout that we had gone to. I made an effort to recall that day, but I was unable to recall anything inappropriate Emily had said. I seemed to recall that everyone got along just great. But Lily was determined. She claimed that the remarks stayed with her and that she didn't want the wedding to be filled with negativity. She didn't want her wonderful day to be marred by any controversy. I looked to Alex in the hopes that he would intervene, but he remained silent. It truly hit me at that point. On this, Alex was on her side. I asked him straight out if he thought Lily was right. When he did speak, it wasn't the answer I was hoping for. He claimed that even if he didn't totally share Lily's perspective, he had to stand by her, particularly on their wedding day. He insisted that my wife was not included because it was her day. It was like being punched in the stomach. The fact that my own brother was cool with this astounded me. It was like being betrayed. I expressed to them both my belief that they were exaggerating the situation, that it was most likely a simple miscommunication if Emily had said anything. Lily, however, would have none of it. "I don't want to risk any tension at the wedding," she stated. Things began to heat up. I was angry, and I could hear my voice getting louder as I accused Lily of harboring resentment over something that really wasn't all that important. However, Lily refused to back down, and Alex only sat there, as if he wanted to vanish. Then Lily made a statement that truly caught me off guard. She said that no one was complaining about Emily's exclusion, since some of the other family members shared her opinion. It seemed unbelievable to me. I had previously believed that this was only between her and Emily, but I was now learning that other members of my family were also involved. I felt as though I had lost touch with my own family. I was more perplexed and torn than ever as I left the meeting. A part of me wanted to stand up for Emily no matter what, but I also began to worry if she could have unintentionally upset Lily. The doubt had been sown, and I detested the fact that I was even doubting it. I told Emily everything that had happened when I got home. She was upset, indignant, really. She made a resolute vow that she had never uttered anything like to what Lily was claiming she had said. It didn't make things any easier, but I did believe her. The wedding was no longer the only focus. Emily believed that my family was unfairly singled her out. To be honest, I couldn't hold her responsible. There was awkwardness with my family during the following few days. There was tension, but no one brought up the wedding again, unspoken. Emily became even more reclusive, staying away from family get-togethers and refusing to participate in any activities involving Lily or Alex. Our marriage was beginning to suffer as well. I was caught in the between, not knowing how to proceed, and Emily was upset that I hadn't spoken up for her more vehemently. I knew I had to stop putting things off. The wedding was quickly approaching. and I had to choose between supporting Emily and running the possibility of a full-blown family conflict or attending without her. I didn't know if there was any way to get out of this without losing something significant, and it felt like I was being forced to choose between my wife and my family. The second update. The days that followed were pure torture. I kept thinking about the wedding all the time. It was my brother's big day, on the one hand. For months, I had been looking forward to this wedding. I'm excited to join him and his family in celebrating this momentous occasion. However, how could I go while Emily was being shunned in that way? It just didn't feel well with me to come there without her understanding how devastated she was. I gave it a lot of thought, but I also knew I needed to talk to someone about it. I therefore called Mark, my best friend, who has always been adept at looking at things practically. I explained everything to him when we got together for a drink. Mark didn't mince words. He was honest with me when he said that Alex and Lily's actions were flawed. He was shocked to learn that Emily was purposefully left out. He also made it plain that he didn't think I should even think about attending the wedding. "Man, you're right to skip the wedding. Your marriage will suffer if you leave her behind," he said. He was not mistaken. It became clearer to me the more I considered it. Going to that wedding without Emily would give the impression that I didn't mind her being excluded, which I didn't. By no means. At home, however, things were becoming difficult. Emily was having a lot of trouble with everything. She simply lost it one evening. She was sobbing quietly in the kitchen when I found her. She expressed to me how offended she was and how she was beginning to question whether I truly supported her. She claimed that it broke her to feel as though she was being forced out of the family. That really got to me. Even though I knew things were bad, seeing her in that state forced me to make a choice. The next morning, I sat down with Emily and told her I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to the wedding if she wasn't invited. I said it clearly so there would be no doubt. Emily looked relieved, but I could still see the hurt in her eyes. This whole thing had already left a mark on her, even though she was glad I was standing by her. The fact that we were in this situation at all was painful for both of us. After that, I picked up the phone and called Alex. I told him straight I wasn't coming to the wedding if Emily wasn't invited. Alex sounded stunned, like he hadn't expected me to make that choice. He started trying to talk me out of it, saying I was overreacting and that I should just come, even if Emily wasn't, but I held firm. I explained that I couldn't attend an event where my wife was being deliberately excluded. It didn't matter how much I wanted to be there for him. Emily was my priority. The fallout from that phone call was immediate. First, my parents called. They were furious, saying I was causing unnecessary drama and choosing Emily over family obligations. They said I was being manipulated and that Emily was the one creating problems. I was shocked by how angry they were. It was like they couldn't understand why I was standing by my wife in this situation. My parents had always been traditional, but I didn't think they'd ever turn on me like this. I told them the truth that Emily wasn't the source of the drama. The fact that she was being excluded from the wedding for some petty reason was the real issue. I tried to explain how hurtful it was for both of us, but they didn't want to hear it. They kept pushing the narrative that I was overreacting and that family should come first, no matter what. Then Alex texted me. It was a long message full of guilt-tripping language, trying to convince me that I was ruining his wedding by making this about Emily. He told me I should just play along for the day, that it wouldn't be a big deal, but that only made me angrier. It wasn't just about the wedding, it was about the greater picture. This was about sticking up for my wife and our marriage. I wasn't going to back down merely to maintain the peace. Word started circulating through the broader family rapidly. My aunt contacted me stating she understood my decision and supported me. But not everyone was that understanding. I got passive, hostile texts from other cousins calling me beaten by Emily and that I was blowing things out of proportion. It seemed like the whole family was weighing in, and most of them didn't see things from my viewpoint. It was annoying, but I tried not to let it get to me too much. Amidst all the commotion, the one thing that kept me grounded was Emily. She told me how much it meant to her that I was sticking by her. She acknowledged she'd been scared I could collapse under the strain from my family, but knowing I wasn't going to the wedding without her made her feel more safe in our relationship. It was a modest silver lining in an otherwise messed up circumstance. In the days leading up to the wedding, the stress was intense. My parents and Alex stopped reaching out, evidently unhappy that I wasn't going to bend. I felt the solitude deepening, but Emily was there with me, encouraging me that we were doing the right thing. We spoke and tried to work things out for a long time together. I won't lie, when the wedding day finally arrived, I felt bad. I kept wondering about what would have happened if Emily had been there. I was a little disappointed that it had come to this since I knew that people would notice my absence. However, I had no regrets about my choice. There were no updates for my family after the wedding, and it passed without us. Nothing but quiet. That wouldn't last, though, I knew. The actual consequences were still to come, and I was already getting ready for the inevitable encounter. Update 3. I was just waking up the day after the wedding when my phone called. It was my mother. Even though I sensed this call was coming, I wasn't ready for what came next. She wasted no time in polite conversation. Her tone was icy and piercing. "Are you content with who you are?" She started the discussion that way. Already I could see where this was going. I prepared myself. My mother immediately accused me of spoiling Alex's special day, claiming that everyone had noticed my absence. Evidently, others were inquiring as to why I wasn't present, and she gave the impression that I had personally ruined the occasion. I could hear the accusation in every word she spoke, and she was enraged. She said I had shattered things and put Emily before family. I asked her whether she had discussed Emily's exclusion from the invitation with Lily and Alex. She dismissed my suspicion that she had finally received the whole picture, telling me it wasn't a huge thing. I was very affected by that. The ease with which she discarded it astounded me. I lost my temper, acting as though my wife's exclusion didn't matter. I informed her that it was more than simply the wedding, and that it was important to Emily and me. It concerned the unjustified treatment of my wife as an alien. My remarks lingered in the air, and I could feel the tension over the phone, but she refused to back down. Rather, she redoubled her efforts, claiming that I had destroyed the day by overreacting. My dad phoned shortly after, and if I thought things couldn't get worse, I was mistaken. It was much frigid talking to him. He wasn't upset, he felt let down. He expressed his opinion that I should have just set the matter aside for Alex's sake, and that I had disappointed the family by failing to show there. "It's finished." He continued bringing up family responsibilities, but I found it incomprehensible that he expected me to abandon Emily and pretend everything was well, as my dad and I were speaking on the phone. Part of the talk was overheard by Emily. This was too much, even if she had been trying to avoid it. She intervened and expressed her feelings, stating that the wedding snub was the last straw and that they had treated her like an outsider from the start. She spoke to them about it directly for the first time. I realized how badly all of this had hurt her as I stood there supporting her. At last, I came clean to my folks. This undercurrent of latent aggression had always been there in their treatment of Emily, and it was now evident that the wedding exclusion was deliberate. I informed them that unless they admitted their wrongdoing, I would no longer be going to any future family gatherings. I never imagined having to draw that boundary, yet here we were. Alex got in touch later that day. He claimed to be conflicted since he didn't anticipate such a severe rift would result from omitting Emily. To be honest, I was shocked that he didn't think I would truly miss the wedding. I said that I couldn't see how he had felt it was acceptable, and that it was irrational of him to expect me to exclude my wife from such a significant occasion. Alex made a mistake at that point that completely altered the situation. It wasn't just Lily who had pushed for Emily to be excluded, he said almost nonchalantly. Emily's attendance had also raised worries from our mother, who stated that she didn't want any drama during the wedding. The earth seemed to have suddenly fallen away from me. I had assumed that the problem was between Lily and Emily the entire time, but it turned out that my own mother had been involved, working behind my back. In a manner I couldn't even describe. I felt deceived. I contacted my mother right away to confront her. She initially attempted to deny it, but when I put more pressure on her, she gave in. After discussing it with Lily, she had concluded that it would be easier if Emily did not attend. I didn't care that she played it down, claiming that they were only trying to prevent any conflict. The reason she didn't even consider talking to me about it was because she had plotted behind my back. For me, that was the tipping moment. I bluntly informed her that it was unacceptable for her to collaborate with Lily behind my back while purposefully excluding Emily. I ended the conversation by telling her that I needed some space. Her excuses were enough for me to stop listening. That talk had immediate consequences. The family was shocked by that. My dad attempted to intervene and mediate, but I wasn't interested in speaking with him until they were prepared to accept the entire extent of their treatment of Emily. To maintain the peace, I wasn't going to continue to ignore this. Emily, however, experienced heartbreak as well as vindication. The entire thing was terrible, but she was happy that I defended her. She didn't want things with my family to become this bad, and I could see how much it affected her. It was a bittersweet experience. While my familial relationships were rapidly deteriorating, we were stronger as a couple. Then followed the backlash on social media. I became aware that some members of my extended family had blocked Emily and me, or unfriended us. At first it was modest, but it was quickly obvious that the gap was widening. At this point, I doubted that anything could ever be fixed. In the end, Emily and I made the decision to temporarily distance ourselves from my family. To recover from the upheaval, we had to put our marriage and ourselves first. We decided to move on without my family if they were unable to change their ways and treat Emily with the dignity she so well deserved. Although it wasn't a simple choice, it seemed to be the only option for us to get past this situation. The fourth update: Emily and I made the decision to leave after all that transpired. No communication with my relatives. We required a rest. Just a few weeks away from all the turmoil and some time to concentrate on ourselves. There was silence. We tried to put the hurt and tension behind us by spending time together. Neither Alex nor my parents called or texted. To be honest, it felt good to be quiet. Then, one night, my mother unexpectedly texted me. It was brief, only a few lines. "We should chat," she said. "I'm prepared to provide an apology." I was surprised. She was abruptly reaching out to apologize after weeks of nothing. Emily and I both thought the same thing when I showed her the note. Was this an effort to patch things up without actually solving the issue, or was it sincere? I consented to meet her in spite of my reservations. I promised Emily that I wouldn't allow her to guilt me into anything, but that I would go by myself to listen to her. Until there was a genuine shift, I didn't want to be drawn back into the family turmoil. We made plans to meet at a little coffee shop in the area. I wasn't sure what to anticipate when I got there, because I hadn't seen my mom since before the wedding. From the beginning, the mood was uneasy. My mother appeared anxious, which was very out of character for her. She launched into what she called an apology without wasting any time in small conversation. She expressed regret for the outcome and asserted that she never intended for Emily or me to feel left out. I was optimistic at first, but as she continued to speak, I became increasingly aware that something was wrong. She made a lot of remarks in her apologies. "If you were offended, I apologize. I didn't intend to imply that Emily and you felt we were excluding her." It seemed conditional, as though she was attempting to downplay the severity of the circumstance. I became increasingly irritated as she continued to talk. I cut her off. Her apologies didn't seem sincere, and I had to call it out. It was more than a simple miscommunication. The decision to leave Emily out was purposeful, and that was painful for us both. I informed her that it wouldn't help to apologize with all these ifs. My remarks caused my mom's face to stiffen, and I could feel her defenses rising. "I don't want any drama at the wedding," she retorted. That irritated me. It was astounding to me that she was still unable to comprehend the issue. I informed her that leaving out Emily caused a lot more trouble than it could have resolved. The entire situation resulted from their decision to expel Emily without cause, and as a result, the family was now divided. In an attempt to defend her behavior, my mother took a step back. She said that she was only attempting to diffuse the awkward situation on Alex's special day because Emily and Lily never really got along. It was all about preserving the peace, she said. However, I wasn't comfortable with that justification. It was obvious that she hadn't considered my reaction. How excluding Emily was a matter of respect, as much as peace. I was growing quite irritated. Then, almost casually, she brought up Emily once again, wondering how she had responded to all my mom had said, suggesting that perhaps Emily was being overly sensitive. For me, That was the last straw. I yelled at her, telling her bluntly that Emily was quite justified in feeling offended. She was being driven out of the family completely after years of being treated like an outsider. She was obviously hurt, and I had had enough of people ignoring it. A change occurred after my outburst. I saw my mother begin to cry as her voice grew softer. She said she was unaware of the harm her activities were causing me. She says she just wanted things to return to normal because she missed me. I was unsure about what to believe. A part of me was dubious, wondering if she was only attempting to win back my favor, but another part of me wondered if she was actually beginning to understand. I was honest with her. Even though I also miss my family, I wasn't willing to jeopardize my connection with Emily in order to restore normalcy. She had to make amends with Emily if she was really about making amends. That required offering her a sincere apology rather than only a nebulous justification for avoiding conflict. I informed her that Emily and I would not be a member of the family until that time. Despite her initial reluctance, my mother finally consented to apologize to Emily. She promised to get in touch, but I could sense she wasn't really sure. Her eyes showed it to me. The extent of the harm she had created was still beyond her comprehension. I wasn't certain if her apologies would be sincere or merely a ploy to hide the truth. I was cautiously optimistic, but yet wary as I left the meeting. Although I was relieved that my mother admitted some of the misconduct, I wasn't sure whether she would actually follow through. For the time being, I chose to assume the worst of her. I informed Emily about the talk when I got home. She listened softly, and I could sense that she shared my skepticism. We decided that we would wait and see what my mother would do next, but we were determined not to fall back into the same habits. We would both be respected if my family couldn't. Without them, we were prepared to proceed. Update 5. My mom apologized a few days after our encounter, but it wasn't as I had anticipated. Emily received a well-crafted text message from my mother. It was only a couple sentences lengthy. She expressed her desire that our family could move on and apologized for any harm caused. Emily and I both recognized the message when she gave it to me. Although it seemed to be an apology, it nevertheless felt impersonal, as if my mother was only attempting to fulfill a need. Why this wounded us so much was not really acknowledged. Emily's response was conflicted. Although she was grateful that my mom had contacted her, she didn't think the larger problems were resolved. The text didn't alter the fact that she was still being viewed as an outsider. "We will proceed on our own terms," I promised her. We weren't going to let this stop with a pathetic apology. They would need to treat us with respect if they wanted us back in their life. Concern about all that had transpired, meantime, quickly spread among the wider family. I began receiving messages from certain cousins, and rumors were circulating. It seems that some people still thought that my decision to skip Alex's wedding was an overreaction. They believed that I ought to have just left, even if Emily wasn't asked to maintain harmony. However, I had stopped listening to that sound. These were those who were either unaware of the issue or did not care to learn about it. I refused to be influenced by their views. Then, suddenly, Alex made contact. He asked if we could get together for drinks alone. After everything, I thought perhaps he had taken some time to think, but I wasn't sure what to make of it. Keeping my expectations low and hoping for the best, I consented to meet him. Alex caught me off guard when we sat down together. He began by expressing regret for his part in the wedding drama. He acknowledged that he ought to have defended Emily and me, but he said he was attempting to keep Lily at bay. I was glad to hear that he was truly remorseful for the way things had turned out. However, I also couldn't deny the harm that had been done. While I appreciated his apologies, I told him as much. Our relationship was no longer the same. Our relationship had suffered during this entire process. I choose to inquire about Lily. Did she intend to get in touch with Emily, or at least admit the harm she had caused? Alex paused. He said that Lily didn't believe she owed anyone an apology, and that she still felt right in her choice to omit Emily. Alex was prepared to make apologies when that struck hard, but Lily was obviously not. She was clinging to any resentment she might have, and there was no indication that this would change. Even though Alex may have regrets, that chat helped me realize something significant. The underlying issue remained unchanged. I wasn't sure whether things could ever be completely fixed, as long as Lily's attitude towards Emily remained unchanged. As his wife clung to this needless animosity, I began to question if I could possibly keep up a relationship with Alex. Emily and I had a lengthy conversation when I came home. After all that had transpired, I asked her whether she felt comfortable still interacting with my family. She told me the truth. She stated that if they actually altered their behavior, she would be open to giving them another opportunity. I couldn't blame her for not wanting to be among people who didn't appreciate her. Both of us had experienced enough. I knew then that I had to make a difficult choice. If my family wasn't prepared to embrace Emily completely, I couldn't keep trying to win their favor or hoping for harmony. We couldn't continue to live in fear that the next family gathering might turn out badly. I so decided to establish some clear limits with Emily. If Emily wasn't welcomed and treated with dignity, we wouldn't go to any more family gatherings. We refused to put up with the same passive-aggressive behavior that we had endured for years. It wasn't about severing all connections. It was about safeguarding our marriage and ourselves. We made the decision to spend less time with my family and concentrate on creating a happier, healthier life for ourselves. I informed my folks of our choice over the phone. My mom was not pleased, as was to be anticipated. Once more, she accused me of putting Emily before my family, as if it were a betrayal of some sort. But I didn't back down. I informed her that any further disrespect for my wife would not be tolerated. I could tell my dad wasn't happy, but he didn't say anything either. This choice had obviously caused a long-lasting divide. Alex was conflicted between his commitment to me and his friendship with Lily, and my parents were upset. It was obvious to me that things would never be the same. The family I used to know felt broken, and I doubted that things would ever be the same again. In spite of everything, I felt stronger than ever. Emily and I had become closer as a result of this event. Despite everything we had gone through, it had ultimately strengthened our bond. Not only were we making it through the ordeal, but we were emerging from it with more strength. We made the decision that it was time to put ourselves first and put the family turmoil behind us. We began organizing a trip we had been discussing for years, and we even started thinking of relocating to a different location in order to start again. Instead of focusing on the past, it seemed like the proper moment to turn to the future. Ultimately, I came to a significant realization. Families are vital, but the ones you create with the people you love are the most significant. Even if it meant leaving some people behind, I felt that sticking by Emily was the correct decision. Story 3. I am the eldest member of my family, and I am 29 years old. There are 3 of my siblings, a 27-year-old sister, a 25-year-old brother. The youngest 2? A sister who is 22 years old. We seemed like a very close-knit family to me throughout the most of my existence. I always looked forward to our Sunday dinners, which we had every week, birthdays, holidays, and even sporadic weekend gatherings. My social life has always revolved on my family, or at least it did in the past. However, things have been different lately. It's difficult to describe, but there seems to have been a strange change in how others behave around me. I initially believed I was dreaming. It seemed like I was missing some of the discussion when I would arrive up for supper. They would chuckle at an incident, and I would receive evasive responses like, "Oh, just catching up," or "You had to be there." When I inquired what they were discussing, I attributed it to my paranoia. I reasoned that perhaps I was reading too much into things due to my worry. However, I saw something that bothered me. Before going to bed on a random Tuesday night, I was browsing Instagram. There had been a tale posted by my brother's girlfriend. The picture was of my family at a dining establishment. A pleasant one or two, the type we often saved for important events. They all appeared content as they laughed together. The problem is that I wasn't present. I was completely unaware of it. I initially believed it may be an antique photograph, but the timestamp indicated that it was taken that evening. I mentioned it to my mother in passing the next day. In order to avoid coming off as accusing, I just said that I had seen the picture and inquired as to whether they had enjoyed themselves. She answered, "Oh, it was just a last-minute thing," with a strange, almost guilty smile. "We assumed you were preoccupied with your job. Something didn't feel right. They typically check in with me, and my schedule isn't very erratic." I didn't press it. but my uneasiness increased as I gave it more attention. I told my best buddy about it while we were hanging out a few days later. She acknowledged that it was odd and advised me to approach them directly if there was a problem. I wanted to, but I felt ill at the thought. I chose to ignore it and hope it was an isolated incident because I was afraid of what I may learn. However, it wasn't. I began to notice an increasing number of occasions to which I was not invited over the course of the following several weeks. Small things initially. Game evenings, beach trips, and brunches. Only posts on social media or sporadic remarks in our group conversations told me. I wasn't the only one excluded either. I had no idea why, but it felt like everyone was in on it. I made the decision to start listening more intently at that point. I discovered that there were jokes and references in the family group chat that I didn't understand. Things for which I lacked context. My family seemed to exist in two distinct incarnations, one in which I participated, and another in which I did not. I made the decision that I had to face them, but each time I got close to doing so, I was stopped. The sensation of suddenly realizing you're an outsider in a room full of people you love is difficult to put into words. I couldn't think of anything specific, but I thought perhaps I had done something to annoy them. As far as I knew, everything was good between us, and I hadn't had any serious disagreements lately. The last straw was last Sunday. My mom called me in the afternoon to let me know that they were rescheduling our dinner, which is usually at my parents' house. She simply stated that they would notify me when the next one was scheduled, without providing an explanation. Although I was a little let down, I reasoned that perhaps something had happened. When I was looking through Instagram later that evening, I came across another post from my brother's girlfriend. It was a group photo of them all enjoying dinner as usual at my parents' house. Except for me, my whole family was present. They had the Sunday dinner without me and didn't even bother to tell me. At that point, everything made sense. This was more than a few sporadic invitations that were missed. They were purposefully keeping me out. It was like being punched in the stomach. I wanted to give them a call immediately, but I was unable to bring myself to do so. I sat there looking at the picture, wondering what could have changed so abruptly. I stayed away from them for the next few days. I skipped answering texts and didn't respond in the group chat. I didn't know how to face them without breaking down or getting angry. In the meantime, I started paying closer attention to their social media posts and the things they were saying to each other. I was looking for any hint of what I might have done wrong, but there was nothing obvious. It got to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. I posted on Reddit asking if anyone else had experienced something similar. The responses were overwhelming. People told me I wasn't crazy, that something was definitely up, and I needed to confront my family directly. Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, I got a private message from an anonymous account. It said, "I know why they're avoiding you, but you're not ready to hear it yet." Before I could reply, the message was deleted. I was left staring at my screen, more confused than ever. What could be so big that they felt the need to hide it from me? I realized I couldn't avoid this any longer. I had to confront them and find out the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Update 1, I decided enough was enough. I couldn't keep guessing why my own family was shutting me out, so I made a plan. My mom had mentioned a casual family brunch at a nearby cafe this weekend. I figured this would be the perfect time to confront them. I was nervous as hell, but determined I couldn't ignore it anymore. Not after seeing them post about another dinner without me. I showed up early and got us a table, trying to keep my nerves in check. One by one, they trickled in: my brother, then my sisters, and finally my parents. They all seemed surprised to see me already there, almost like they hadn't expected me to show up. I made small talk at first, trying to keep it casual until everyone was settled, but the tension was thick. My brother kept looking at his phone. My sister was unusually quiet, and my mom looked like she was forcing herself to smile. We ordered food, and I decided to get straight to the point. I brought up the photo I'd seen on Instagram, the one where they were all having dinner without me. I expected maybe a bit of guilt or an apology, but instead they just looked at each other like they were caught off guard. My mom quickly tried to brush it off, saying they thought I was busy with work, but I wasn't buying it. This wasn't the first time it had happened. I pressed on, listing off specific events I'd found out about through social media: the beach day, the brunches, the weekend getaway. The table went quiet. You could hear a pin drop, My brother gave my mom a sideways glance like he wanted to say something but didn't dare. My youngest sister started fiddling with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. The silence dragged on, and it felt like the whole cafe was staring at us. I didn't care anymore. I asked them flat out if I had done something wrong. Had I upset them? Was there a reason I was being left out like this? My voice got louder, and I could feel tears welling up, but I held them back. I was shaking, but I needed answers. My parents started suggesting it wasn't a big problem, that I was building something out of nothing. My brother cut her off, appearing irritated. He shouted out that there was a reason they hadn't been involving me, but it was tricky. My dad flashed him a warning look, but the harm was already done. I demanded to know what was so complex that my own relatives couldn't tell me about it. That's when everything escalated. My sister tried to calm me down, grabbing for my hand, but I jerked away. I was outraged. I told them I deserved the truth. If there was something going on, I had a right to know. They all simply sat there staring at me like they didn't know what to say. It felt like I was a stranger to them. I couldn't handle it anymore. I grabbed my jacket, rose up, and walked out. I didn't even glance back. My mother was shouting my name, but I chose to ignore it. I simply got in my car and drove. I didn't know where I was heading. All I had to do was leave. My younger sister texted me that evening. She pleaded with me for a little more time, saying it wasn't what I had assumed and that she would explain everything shortly. I didn't respond. What might be said? I was gushing out with no closure, as if I had just opened a wound that was already festering. After I got home, I updated Reddit. To see whether anyone else felt this was as twisted up as I did, I wanted to get it out. The reaction was instantaneous. For me, they were indignant. Theories ranging from family conflict to a major secret were abundant in the comments. To keep me safe, they were hiding. Though it was a lot to process, it helped me feel less isolated, as if I wasn't going overboard. Then my phone rang late that evening. It was my father. I nearly didn't answer, but my curiosity won out. He sounded softer, different, nearly guilty. He expressed regret for the brunch disaster and the way things had turned out. He just replied it wasn't his job to explain when I begged him to be honest. He said that I had to believe them, and that it was complex. Feeling even more disoriented than before, I hung up. I made the decision to contact my aunt the next morning. I've always thought of her as my second mother, so I assumed she would be the one to inform me what was happening. We spoke for a while, but it didn't feel right. When I explained what had happened to her, she appeared shocked, and there were lengthy silences during which it looked as though she was unsure of what to say. She gave me this mysterious warning before we hung up. Simply exercise patience. You'll comprehend in due time. She hung up after that. I was more perplexed than ever when I stared at my phone. How could it be that large that I was being kept in the dark? And why, except from me, did it seem like they were all in agreement? I was unable to wait any longer. This was more serious than I had anticipated because even my aunt was acting strangely. I began formulating a strategy. I'd find out on my own if they didn't tell me. This was no longer about a few dinners lost. My entire family seemed to have erected a wall between us, and I was tired of being excluded. I'll be going further in the upcoming update. I will discover what they are concealing, even though it destroys everything. I must know the truth, whatever it is. Update 2. I couldn't get rid of the sensation that something was really wrong following the terrible brunch confrontation. Things were made worse by my dad's apologies that sounded like remorse, and my sister's mysterious messages. I understood that I would have to look for the answers on my own if I wanted them. I went into full detective mode since it was obvious that my family wasn't prepared to reveal the facts. Without giving anything away, I wanted a means to see what was going on behind the scenes. In order to create a new Instagram account, I asked my closest friend whether I may use her phone. I followed my relatives and some of their close acquaintances, making it appear to be a generic profile. I reasoned that if I was missing out on events, their posts or articles could contain hints. It was not long before something went wrong. A few days later, my youngest sister shared a story on Instagram showing her and my brother at what appeared to be a laid-back family get-together. However, she must have accidentally placed a screenshot of a text conversation in the screenshot's corner. The group chat's name caught my attention. No op for family time? My heart fell. Before she could remove anything, I quickly snapped a snapshot. It was there in front of me. In fact, they formed a group chat just for me to be on. There were more than a few missed invitations. They had set up a whole room to discuss things behind my back. I knew I had to play it carefully, even though I felt nauseous. I couldn't just charge in without understanding the purpose of this. I requested my younger sister to get together over the phone later that evening. Her face went white the moment I showed her the screenshot when we met at a tiny coffee shop. She began to stutter, claiming that I shouldn't have seen it and that it was an error. I questioned her about why I wasn't in the group conversation. I could see she was in a panic and that she was about to weep. She finally acknowledged it after a protracted quiet. About 6 months prior, the group chat was established with the express purpose of discussing a private matter that they did not want me to be aware of. She pleaded with me to keep the information from our parents. She simply shook her head, claiming it was not her place to explain when I asked her what was so private that it justified keeping me in the dark. When I saw that she was truly afraid, I became even more concerned about what may be so significant that they were all keeping it from me. I kept thinking about the timetable she suggested 6 months ago on the way home. Around that time, things between Kevin and I started to go south, and it seemed like everything was coming to an end. At first, my family had liked him. They invited him to family gatherings, he would attend Sunday meals, and my mother even referred to him as a good fit for me. However, their mindset changed nearly immediately after that. When I brought him up, they would shift the topic, and they ceased inquiring about him. Shortly after, we split up, but I always thought it was a coincidence. I made the decision to contact Kevin. After everything that had transpired between us, it seemed strange, but perhaps he knew something. When he answered the phone after I phoned him, I could see he was taken aback. He paused for a long time when I asked him whether he knew anything about the abrupt shift in my family's behavior. He told me he didn't want to get engaged and seemed uneasy. After stating that it wasn't his place, he attempted to hang up. I pushed him, telling him that I needed the truth and that I was tired of being kept in the dark. Just before our breakup, he finally acknowledged that there had been a crisis involving my family, but he would not elaborate. He hung up after telling me that he shouldn't be the one to inform me. I was more perplexed than ever when I stared at my phone. After that, I immediately went to Reddit and told everyone what I had discovered. The replies went viral right away. There were people with hypotheses everywhere. Some speculated that it may be a covert affair. Some even conjectured about covert paternity problems, while others mentioned financial difficulties. People began messaging me to say they had experienced something similar, but it didn't all make sense. Then a burner account sent me a private message. It just said that, "Your family believes they are keeping you safe. They don't want you to learn about last year's events." The account was removed before I could respond. I didn't know what this individual was discussing. I made an effort to recall any significant occasions from the previous year that might support this level of concealment, but nothing came to mind. I'd had enough by this time. Determined to find out, I drove directly to my parents' house. I surprised them both by entering without knocking. I didn't spend time chit-chatting. I insisted that they explain why I was being excluded after informing them that I was aware of the private group conversation. Before either of them could say anything, my dad avoided my eyes and just gazed at the floor while my mom looked like she was going to weep. Through the front entrance, my brother entered. After glancing at the situation, he blew up. He screamed at them, telling them that they could no longer deceive me and that I deserved to know the truth. Before I could say anything, he slammed the door behind him and rushed off. Even after I went back to my parents, they remained silent. My mother simply repeated herself, "You'll soon find out. Have faith in us." It had the feel of a bad dream. Knowing that whatever the secret was, it was destroying my family, I left their home feeling more alone than before. I'm done waiting, but I'm not sure what will happen next. I will discover the truth, even if it involves dismantling all of their obstacles. Update 3. After my brother stormed out and my parents stopped talking, I reached a breaking point and could no longer play their game of silence. I launched the primary chat window for the family group. I sent a message to the one I'm still in. "I'm finished. I'll break off communication if you don't tell me what's happening. Until I know the truth, I will not talk to any of you again. The reaction was nearly instantaneous. My younger sister's call was the first message to arrive on my ringing phone. She begged me to meet her face to face, seeming frantic. If I simply gave her a chance to explain, she said she would tell me everything. I consented, arranging to meet in a peaceful cafe where we used to hang out as children. Away from the rest of the family, it was a neutral location. She was already there, sitting in a corner, looking anxious when I got there. She looked around the room as if she thought someone may enter and stop us. After I took a seat, she began speaking in a voice that was hardly audible above a whisper before I could even respond. After bearing this load for too long, she felt as though she was releasing it. She informed me that it appeared odd when one of our family friends saw Kevin out with someone else last year. It wasn't only a friendly encounter, they appeared to be a couple. A family acquaintance had taken a picture and forwarded it to my mother. Everything spiraled from there. Instead of telling me, my dad and I chose to face Kevin straight once my mom revealed it to them. Kevin reportedly confessed to infidelity, but he pleaded with them to keep it from me. He said he didn't want to screw things up, and that he was already intending to break up with me shortly. With their boundless knowledge, my family chose to act independently. They struck a bargain with him. They wouldn't discuss the affair, and he would end our relationship swiftly and amicably. They believed that by doing this, they were saving me the agony of discovering the truth. This is what my sister told me. She appeared truly distressed, as though she were going through it all again. She said that soon after, a private group conversation was established to ensure that nobody unintentionally revealed it. They utilized it to schedule activities without my presence and to prevent any reference to Kevin. She argued that they were attempting to protect me, but now she saw how grave their error had been. I only listened while sitting there. Time seemed to have halted. I couldn't decide whether to cry, yell, or simply go. My sister apologized repeatedly, claiming that at the time they were acting appropriately. She said that she saw it was a big mistake after realizing how much it affected me to be excluded. They all did. Without a word, I rose and walked out of the cafe. After learning that my entire family had plotted behind my back, believing they knew what was best for me, I was unable to sit there any longer. I spent some time driving about in a state of confusion, trying to take it all in. I had the impression that I was leading someone else's life, as if it were impossible for this to be occurring. When I arrived home, I shared the update on Reddit, and I received a quick reaction. People were incensed about me. Outrage erupted in the comments, which described it as a huge violation of trust. Some people expressed shock that my family would strike a deal with my unfaithful ex, rather than coming clean. They were totally wrong to conceal it from me, even if some people believed they could have meant well. Though there were differing views, most people agreed that my family had made a grave mistake. I returned to my parents' home later that evening. I had to approach them directly. They both appeared to have been waiting for me when I stepped in. As if they anticipated this discussion, I questioned them about why they believed they had the authority to decide on something so important for me. My mother broke down in tears right away, claiming that she couldn't bear the idea of me being devastated and that she believed she was protecting me. She apologized repeatedly, again and again. My brother was also present. He acknowledged that he spoke out the loudest about protecting the secret. He said that this was the wisest course of action since he couldn't bear to watch me in pain. His apology seemed insincere. The harm was already done. That's what I told them. It seemed unbelievable to me that they would consider it acceptable to deal behind my back and control my life in such a way. They then mentioned the private group chat. My father, who had been largely silent, said that they had made it especially to prevent unintentionally disclosing any information on Kevin's adultery. They believed that I would be spared the agony of discovering the truth in this manner, which was preferable. I informed them that all they had done was to undermine my confidence in them. It was impossible for me to look at them without feeling deceived. I told them I needed some time apart and left the home. I was unable to be with them, not at this moment. I'm not sure whether I'll ever be able to forgive them for this degree of dishonesty. They denied me the ability to handle my own relationship, confront reality, and make my own choices. Rather, they manipulated my life, and now I have to deal with the fallout. I said that I'm thinking about going to therapy as I wrapped up my Reddit update. I feel like I need assistance coping with this betrayal, since I'm not sure how to digest all that has transpired. I expressed gratitude to everyone for their up-to-date assistance. In a manner I never anticipated, the comments have been a lifeline for me. Knowing that I'm not the only one who believes this was a serious betrayal of trust is comforting. I'm severing my familial relationships for the time being. I need time to think about my next steps. The fourth update: I knew I needed space once everything fell apart. The incessant calls and texts from my relatives, each attempting to offer an explanation or an apology in their own unique manner, were too much for me to bear. I blacklisted them on social media and muted the group conversation. Without their voices in my thoughts, I needed time to absorb what I had learned. I didn't make contact for a whole month. With a persistent aching that never quite went away, it felt similar to a detox. I made the decision to visit a therapist at that period. My entire life seemed to have fallen apart, and I had no idea how to begin reassembling the fragments. I wasn't shy during our first session. I explained everything: the bargain they struck with Kevin behind my back, the treachery, the private conversation. After my therapist listened intently, we began to unravel everything. She noted that although my family may have wanted to keep me safe, their behavior was domineering and deceptive. Hearing that I wasn't exaggerating was reassuring. I had been away from them for about 2 weeks when I received an unexpected email from Kevin. Curiosity overcame me, and I nearly erased it without reading it. There were several apologies in the lengthy statement. He expressed contrition for everything, including the lying, adultery, and the way he handled our separation. He acknowledged that he felt forced by my family to stop things soon, and he didn't resist because he believed it would be simpler. He apologized for the hurt he caused and said that he wishes he had been upfront with me from the beginning. It was like tearing apart an old sore to read what he had to say. I couldn't help but question how much of our separation was actually my decision and how much was planned by my family, since it brought back memories I wanted to ignore. My therapist assisted me in processing the feelings it evoked when I shared the email with her. She told me not to answer, not immediately anyhow, and instead of getting back into the chaos, concentrate on understanding what it meant to me. Then my aunt called without warning. I had initially contacted her in the hopes of receiving answers. She had not been involved in the drama until now, but it appears that she has now learnt about the consequences. She wasted little time in getting right to the point when we met. She informed me that the family's behavior was motivated by fear rather than animosity. My mother had apparently experienced something similar in her early years. She suffered years of heartbreak after being severely cheated on. My aunt thought my mom was attempting to protect me from the same suffering she went through, even if it meant lying to me by projecting her own trauma onto me. It was like discovering a new puzzle piece when I heard this. It provided me with some background, but it didn't justify what they did. My mother had been the most determined to protect the secret, and it made sense. Why did she appear so desperate when we were arguing? Her behavior nearly made me envision her younger self, trapped in the same cycle of suffering and attempting to stop history from happening again. Next, my brother contacted me and proposed that we attempt family therapy. He informed me that he and my sisters had already been attending therapy sessions in an effort to overcome their guilt and find a solution. He promised to go to whatever lengths, even if it meant beginning over, to win back my faith. It was the first indication that they were paying attention to this. I liked the gesture even though I wasn't sure whether I was ready to sit in a room with all of them just yet. I gave a Reddit update on what had transpired since my departure. No interaction. There was a mixed response. Some believed that I was justified in keeping my distance, stating that I needed time to recover before considering any kind of reunion. Others advised me to try family therapy, pointing out that my family's readiness to go demonstrated sincere regret. It made me think about a number of things. My dearest friend gave me the next surprise. One evening, she drew me aside and confessed that she had sensed something wasn't right the previous year. She was aware of my family's strange behavior around Kevin, but she had no supporting evidence and didn't want to further the situation by bringing it up. She said that although she felt bad for not alerting me sooner, she has now become irate on my behalf. If I needed moral support, she even volunteered to accompany me to a therapy appointment. I made the decision to speak with my dad one-on-one initially. I wanted to hear his side of the story because he had been the most silent of all of this. Away from the house and other distractions, we met at a park. He made no attempt to justify the events. Rather, he apologized while looking me in the eye. Despite his initial disapproval of the proposal, he complied since he didn't want to offend my mother. For the first time since it all began, he acknowledged that he felt like a bad dad and that he ought to have defended me and spoken the truth. I sensed a little fissure in the barrier I had constructed. His candor was a beginning, but it wasn't the end. It made me think about the potential of forgiveness and helped me see that none of them had an easy time making this choice. I made it apparent that I needed to establish some boundaries, but I also said I would consider going to a family therapy session with them. I informed him that they would have to let me take the lead if I went. No more secrets, no more falsehoods. I'd go and we'd be done if they couldn't manage it. He concurred. Even though it was only a tiny step, it seemed like the beginning of something greater. At least we're not caught in the same pattern of avoidance and quiet, but I'm still unsure of where we're headed. I'm taking it day by day for the time being. It will be a hard journey, but perhaps, just possibly, there is a path ahead. The fifth update. I arrived at the first planned family therapy session unsure of what to anticipate. Everyone appeared tense, and the air seemed thick, as if we were all trying to avoid saying something inappropriate. No one spoke out straight away, even though my therapist began by establishing ground rules and providing a safe environment for us to communicate. It was tense. We avoided making eye contact as we sat there. Nothing we could have said could have replaced the quiet. My therapist finally turned to face me and asked me to begin. I inhaled deeply and explained everything. The falsehoods they told me about Kevin, the covert group conversation, and the fact that they had taken choices for me without ever consulting me, made me feel betrayed. Nothing was sugar-coated by me. I just explained the situation and the pain to them. My mom lost it at that point. She broke down in tears and said she believed she was defending me. She said that she was reminded of a traumatic event from her past when she saw me with Kevin. She once didn't want me to experience it. She repeatedly apologized and acknowledged that she had made a grave error, stating she now saw that by hiding everything from me, she had betrayed my trust and agency. I could see the shame on my siblings' faces, but they remained silent. At last, my brother came out and acknowledged that he ought to have opposed the proposal. He claimed that at the time, it was preferable to comply, as he was too scared of offending our mother. He expressed sorrow for not giving me the truth sooner and apologized. I explained to them how hurtful it was to be left out and controlled in that way, how my own family made me feel alienated. The secret they kept wasn't the only thing at stake. It has to do with the trust they betrayed. For a while, we all sat there quietly, allowing everything to sink in. I then established some limits. No more keeping secrets or making choices for me. I would go if they were unable to respect that. They all concurred. Even though I knew it was just the start of a long journey, it seemed like a minor win. My brother took out his phone during the session and, in a symbolic act, erased the private group conversation in front of everyone. My sisters followed suit. They vowed to never again keep things from me and to utilize the main family conversation going forward. It was a beginning, but it wasn't a complete solution. I made the decision to end another chapter after the session. Kevin sent me an email, and I replied. Although I expressed my gratitude for his apologies, I made it plain that I had no intention of reopening that door. I informed him that I was going on with my life and that I wanted closure. I didn't want to have any more resentment or hypothetical thoughts. In a quick response, he expressed his understanding and best wishes for me. I felt as though a burden had been lifted. I saw little but significant behavioral changes in my family over the course of the following few weeks. They really tried to engage me in planning, invited me to informal get-togethers, and checked in with me more frequently. Even though there were still uncomfortable times and it wasn't flawless, it was better than before. It meant something that they were making an effort. We made the decision to establish a new custom, a monthly family meal during which we would freely talk about whatever on our minds. No more dodging difficult discussions. I proposed that we each share a challenge during the first supper. Although it was uncomfortable at first, My brother spoke up about the shame he had been suffering ever since the secret was made public. My mother talked candidly about her worries and how, without realizing it, she had been projecting her own prior suffering onto me. We had never been that forthright with one another before. Although it wasn't simple, we felt as though we were at last headed in the right direction. I kept going to my own therapy sessions, concentrating on regaining my trust and boosting my self-esteem. I felt like I was getting well for the first time in a long time, even though I knew I wasn't completely recovered. I thought this would be my last post, so I updated Reddit. Throughout this whole situation, everyone's support has been amazing. Knowing that there were a lot of others who shared my experience has made me feel less alone. I expressed my gratitude to everyone for their suggestions and support. In a manner I never anticipated, it has been a lifeline. I was about to wrap up this chapter when I received an unexpected letter in the mail. The family acquaintance who had first seen Kevin with the other woman was the source of it. There were several apologies in the letter. They clarified that they never meant for things to go out of control like way. They attempted to speak to me directly about what they had witnessed, but my mother cut them off and told them to keep it to themselves. Although it was a startling turn of events, it also enabled me to fill in the last gap in the narrative. I made the decision to speak with my mother one last time. It was only the two of us when we first met. In the end, we both started weeping. She acknowledged that her actions had been dictated by her own anxieties and prior trauma. She claimed to have come to the realization that, rather than letting me deal with the problem on my own, she was attempting to control it by projecting her own suffering onto me. An embrace and a pledge to try and start over marked the conclusion of the frank and emotional conversation. In hindsight, all of this has taught me a lot. I've come to understand the value of being truthful, even when it hurts. I've witnessed how lies and secrets, regardless of their motivations, may erode confidence. It will take time to regain that trust, but I think we're now headed in the right direction. I feel optimistic about the future for the first time in a long time, even if it's not ideal and certainly not simple. I take things day by day and am cautiously optimistic. There is still a lot of work for my family and me to do, but at least we are working together now, and that seems like a decent place to start.